We want products made in America, made by American hands.
Stop taking delivery of Boeing aircraft.
Boeing jets.
Breaking news out of Washington. A shockwave just rattled America's industrial backbone. Former President Donald Trump is fuming, Boeing is scrambling, and Canada, yes, Canada has pulled off a stunning coup in America's own backyard. In a move that blindsided US officials and stunned global markets, Canadian aerospace firms have quietly secured multi-billion-dollar Boeing contracts once thought untouchable. And the fallout? Massive. From layoffs in Kansas and Washington to the collapse of supply chains across the Midwest. This isn't just about planes, it's about America's position as the world's industrial superpower, and whether that title is now slipping north of the border. So what exactly happened? How did Canada outmaneuver America's crown jewel of aerospace? And what does this mean for US workers, the 2024 election map, and even the balance of global power? Stick with us, because this story could change the way we think about American manufacturing forever. But first, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to USA Finance Wire, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss updates on the stories shaping our economy and our future. Now let's dive in. Trump's promise versus today's reality. For months, Donald Trump had promised Americans that his aggressive tariff policies would protect US jobs. From fiery campaign rallies in Ohio to blue-collar towns in Pennsylvania, he thundered that no nation, least of all Canada, would undercut American workers again. Back in 2024, the White House slapped sweeping tariffs on imported aircraft parts. The idea? Protect Boeing and the thousands of Americans building planes in Missouri, Washington State, and South Carolina. Tariffs were sold as a shield, a way to make sure aerospace jobs stayed in the US. But instead of fortifying Boeing, those tariffs ended up doing something no one expected. They pushed Boeing itself to look abroad, and Canada, America's closest ally and biggest trade partner, was waiting with open arms. The shocking announcement from Ottawa. The breaking news came in the form of a single announcement out of Ottawa. Canadian aerospace firms, backed by government subsidies and international partnerships, secured a wave of Boeing supply and service contracts once thought to be locked in American hands. And these weren't minor deals. We're talking about fuselage assembly contracts, avionics components, the high-tech brains of modern aircraft, long-term maintenance packages worth billions. Industry insiders confirmed the stunning detail. The winning bids didn't come from Seattle or St. Louis. They came from Canadian facilities in Quebec and Ontario. For Boeing, it's a survival strategy, diversifying away from US tariffs and reducing exposure to political risk. For Washington, though, the optics are brutal. One of America's most iconic companies, the symbol of US engineering might, is now outsourcing critical work to Canada. Trump's reaction. Outrage on Truth Social. The news hit Washington like an earthquake. Within minutes, Trump erupted on Truth Social, calling it a total betrayal of American workers and vowing retaliation. He accused Canada of economic treason and promised sweeping tariffs on Canadian aerospace imports. But behind the bluster, experts were quick to point out, the White House doesn't have much leverage left. These contracts are already signed. Retaliatory tariffs would only drive up costs for US airlines, Delta, American, United, all of which rely on Boeing aircraft to modernize their fleets. Raise costs too much, and those airlines might do something unthinkable, buy from Europe's Airbus instead. That would mean not only jobs lost, but also Boeing's global dominance permanently weakened. The domino effect on American jobs. Let's step back and look at the human toll, because this story isn't just about trade wars and corporate strategies. It's about communities. From Everett, Washington to Wichita, Kansas, Boeing has been more than a company. It's been the backbone of local economies. Generations of families built their livelihoods on these jobs. Entire towns, restaurants, schools, hospitals, small businesses, all depend on steady Boeing paychecks. Now, with contracts leaving the US, that entire ecosystem is at risk. Economists at Georgetown University estimate that for every aerospace job lost, up to 3 additional local jobs vanish in sectors like healthcare, retail, and education. So even a 10% cut in Boeing's US workforce could ripple outward into mass layoffs, thousands of workers suddenly without paychecks, small towns hollowed out, and property values collapsing in once thriving communities. One analyst described it perfectly. Once Canada grabs the lead contract, the supporting pillars of America's aerospace industry begin to wobble. Impact beyond Boeing. The US supply chain shakes. The shock isn't contained to Boeing plants. America's vast manufacturing ecosystem, from steel mills in Pennsylvania to electronics firms in Texas, is now feeling tremors. Aluminum smelters in the Rust Belt face reduced demand as Canadian factories source metals closer to home. Electronic suppliers in Silicon Valley and Dallas invested millions to build avionics for Boeing jets. Those investments? Now stranded. Chemical and fuel industries that fed aerospace production are bracing for contraction. This isn't just an aerospace story anymore, it's a potential industrial crisis. Financial fallout. Markets react. Wall Street didn't take long to respond. Boeing's stock plunged within hours of the announcement, wiping out billions in shareholder value. Pension funds heavily invested in Boeing in states like Illinois, California, and New York suddenly face huge losses. That means retirees' savings could be at risk. Meanwhile, Canadian firms like Bombardier saw their stock prices surge as investors piled into the new aerospace hotspot. Global investors from Frankfurt to Tokyo are now advising clients to diversify into Canadian aerospace equities, a move that could permanently redirect capital flows away from the US political earthquake in swing states. The timing of all this couldn't be worse politically. Trump built his second-term promise on restoring American jobs, especially in the Rust Belt and swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Now, as pink slips roll out in aerospace towns, the optics are devastating. Communities that once trusted Trump's tariffs to protect them are instead seeing contracts move abroad. And in swing states where elections are decided by razor-thin margins, even a few thousand job losses could swing the balance. Make no mistake, this isn't just an economic crisis. It's a political earthquake. Canada's long game. How they pulled it off? Here's the part most Americans aren't hearing. Canada didn't just get lucky. Ottawa has been playing the long game for years. Canadian officials have carefully nurtured their domestic aerospace sector, building manufacturing clusters around Montreal and Toronto, investing heavily in research and development, partnering with European suppliers, supporting firms like Bombardier to build engineering expertise. So when Washington slapped tariffs on aircraft parts in 2024, Canada was in the perfect position to absorb that work. In other words, America's own trade policies set the stage for Canada's rise. The global optics, allies, and rivals. Take note, this isn't just about North America. Globally, the symbolism is massive. For decades, Boeing wasn't just a company, it was a symbol of American power. Buying a Boeing jet meant buying into the reliability and influence of the United States. Now, the world is watching America's closest ally peel away contracts and showcase itself as a more stable partner. NATO allies see Canada as a more reliable aerospace hub, less volatile than Washington's trade policies. Asian nations like Japan and South Korea may now lean toward Canadian suppliers as a middle ground between Washington and Beijing. China and Russia see opportunity. If Canada can chip away at Boeing, why can't they? Every contract Canada secures makes Boeing, and by extension America, look less invincible. In short, this isn't just economics, it's geopolitics. The bigger picture, America's industrial prestige at risk. Washington has always used industrial dominance as a diplomatic tool. When U.S. presidents travel abroad, they don't just bring Air Force One, they bring the unspoken message, America builds the best machines in the world. But today that message looks weaker. If Boeing increasingly relies on Canadian factories to deliver its promises, then the myth of U.S. self-sufficiency in strategic industries starts to crumble. Allies notice, rivals exploit, investors adjust, and global power shifts, one contract at a time. What happens next? The next 5 years could decide everything. If Canada successfully scales production and proves reliable, Boeing could deepen its ties, permanently shifting part of North America's aerospace center of gravity. If U.S. tariffs continue, airlines might look to Airbus or even China's COMAC for cheaper options. If Boeing can't balance U.S. politics with Canadian partnerships, it risks alienating both Washington and global investors. For America, the stakes are existential. This isn't just about Boeing. It's about whether the United States remains the industrial superpower of the 21st century. If you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to US Finance Wire, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dive.